Hello, welcome everyone. In this video, I'll be showing you how to make a simple top bodice, a sloper, where you can use this sloper to make other fashions by changing the neckline. You would have to lower the darts, and it's used as a base for any fashion that you want to design. And I'm using my Smart Doll Cortex to demonstrate, but you can do this with any doll. We're going to need a piece of muslin fabric. I'm going to cut approximately 5 by 7 pieces, pencil, scissors, a ruler, and pins. And then you're gonna need your doll. I'm using this Cortex doll, so I can tape her, and I'm not worried about messing her up. She has the top that swivels, so I taped it on each side to stabilize it with transparent tape. So I'm going to be using her to drape the fabric on and make the sloper. And then the muslin fabric, you can use any fabric. Just make sure that it's not a stretchy fabric, that it's a nice 100% cotton will do. But I use muslin because it's cheaper or less expensive than regular fabric. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm gonna first cut my pieces of fabric, and we're gonna lay the piece of fabric on the lengthwise grain, otherwise called the grain line. And what I'll do is I'll make a little snip on the fabric just so that I know that I'm cutting it nice and straight, and just tail it. So I'm gonna need about this much, a couple of rectangles, just enough that they're gonna drape over half of the body and a little bit past. Next, we'll make sure we straighten the fabric. Looks pretty straight. So if it looks like it's not straight, like at a 90-degree angle on the sides, you can just pull it into place. And then we're gonna press it. If you want it a little stiffer, you can starch it. I'm gonna go ahead and press it. I'm gonna start with put the one piece of fabric to the side and start with the front. We're gonna do the shape at the front, and then we'll do the back after the front is done. So to begin, we find the lengthwise grain of the fabric, and we're going to draw a straight line right across. I'm drawing it close to the selvage. This kind of helps stabilize the fabric, but you don't need to have that selvage there, especially if it makes the fabric wrinkle. So draw a straight line with your pencil, and then that's going to be the center front. And I'm going to start on the right side of the body. Then bring your piece of fabric up so that you have enough to, I think I might have cut this too short. but we'll work with it. Enough to drape over the shoulder, and then I'm going to draw another line. And this line is optional. It's just to help me make sure that I have the fabric straight. At a 90-degree angle to the first line, just draw it straight across. Now we're normally in real life, people drape on clothes form, and they use pins to stick into the clothes form, but I don't have one, obviously, so I'm going to use tape instead of pins. So the first thing is to find the center of the doll, body, and some people wrap their dolls in plastic and lots of tape, and they can draw straight on the doll to keep it. But on this doll, you can see the center because the belly button has a little indentation, and then where the clavicle is here, that's the middle of the neck. So we're gonna place our fabric, and I drew this line purposefully over the fullest part of the bust. That helps me also drape the fabric. So we're gonna tape the line that we drew right in that center. So that's my center. I'm gonna tape it on the bottom here. Maybe across here, across the bust line, just so the fabric doesn't shift. And tape it, but don't stretch the fabric. Don't pull on it so it doesn't distort the grain line. And then we're going to start by making this part of the bust, making it nice and flat, how the pattern would lay, or how the garment would lay on the doll, and start cutting slits where the neck is, just to make the fabric lay around the neck. And when I first made this, I was making all kinds of jagged lines, but I learned through trial and error that it's better to make nice straight lines on the fabric. And just follow the neck hole, like where you would have your neck hole. And then do that until you get to the shoulder and the fabric drapes across the shoulder. Now this is all nice and flat. Now you can take a piece of tape and tape it over the shoulder. Now we're going to go around the armhole. So my piece of fabric is way too long. So I'm going to go ahead and cut it. And at this point, you don't rip your fabric, because if you rip your fabric, you might distort it again. So it's better to just cut it. Now I'm going to make slits, just like I did for the neck. I'm going to make them for the shoulder. So just follow along the shoulder hole. In this style, you can feel here where the joint is. So I'm going to follow that curve. And follow that curve until your fabric fits under the underarm and folds nicely. So I'm going to keep doing the slits until I get to that point. And remember not to go in too far. Just go in as far as you need to. Okay. Okay, I think that was enough, so maybe a little bit here. See, now that goes nicely around the underarm. And just do slits wherever you need to, just to make the fabric lay flat. Okay, so I'm still making slits just to make it nice and flat around here, so it's not pulling. This is kind of trial and error. So now see that it's nice and it curves around the side here. So gently pull it until you're satisfied that it curves around the upper part. It's not going to be perfectly flat because, you know, she has, like, the clavicle protrudes. So now take that and tape it to the back. And I'm making this one with only one dart, just to make it easy. And now here where the fabric bunches up, we're still on the straight of grain. We're going to take that part of the fabric and use enough tape if the tape that you have on there is not holding. And we're going to make a pleat. And for the pleats, for doll clothes or for any clothes, you want to do it at the fullest point of the bust line. So make your clips that if you need to on the waist, so that the fabric lays flat right here like this, and gently, I'm going to use another piece of tape back here. I learned this from making a lot of, I'm learning how to make, I want to learn how to make patterns. So I've been reading a lot of books on pattern makings, and haven't had any success on making a flat pattern by just doing lines and taking measurements. But this draping, this is perfect for me. So then this is where you're going to use your pins. Pin your pleat where you want your pleat to be. And usually when you're making pleats for doll, for dresses or for front things, I like the line to be straight up and down. It's easier for later to, or the seam line, it's easier for later when you want to make, you want to modify it. I'm going to try to post videos on how I use my sloper. If you just want to make a simple dress with a bodice and a full skirt or a circle skirt or whatever kind of skirt, you can do it from this, just from this alone. So I pinned it just straight up and down. When I did my last one, I pinned it this way, and then when I went to sew it, I messed up the seam, so I find that this is the best way. Now we have the shape of our bodice, pretty much. So now we're gonna mark. You can mark it now or mark it when you take it off your pleat. Mark it on both sides. That's gonna be your sewing line. And I'm gonna make a circle here just so I know where the fullest part of the bust is. But you don't have to do that. Well, they call it the apex. That's the apex. Now we're gonna mark our shoulders. Our shoulder line. So on this doll, I just follow the lines of the Cortex. This is going to be a straight line. And then mark where your armhole is going to be. And I mark it around. And then for the bottom of the armhole, you want to leave it about 1/4 of an inch. And you can take these excess things off. About 1/4 of an inch under the underarm. Then we're going to mark our side seam, where our side seam is going to be. Usually this is a straight line. And the last thing we're going to mark on this part of the pattern is where you want your waistline to be. In my case, this is where I want my waistline to be. Mark it on both sides of the dart. And all you need to do is mark it from the side seam to the front. So now our front is ready. Now we're going to work on the back without taking this part off yet. Oh, I forgot. We have to mark the neckline where you want your neck to be, your neckline. I'm marking my neckline, making a round neckline. Because I want to be able to, you can modify your neckline at any time later, you know, make it deeper, make it into a V, whatever, but you're going to use the pattern, the sloper that you're going to make from this. Okay, now we're ready for the back. So for the back, we're pretty much going to follow the same steps that we did to the front with a couple of modifications. So make your lines. Actually, I should have made, I'm not going to make the line across just because that's just going to confuse me because they don't match. But you're going to make your line across the middle where the green line is going to be. Make sure it is at a 90-degree angle. I think I better use this. Yeah. This time we're going to match the back center line. So make sure you have enough fabric to drape across the shoulder, over the shoulder. Put it on your center and tape it down just like we did the front. And I tape it at the center back line. And at the center, put a couple of pieces of tape across that side. And then this one, I also cut it like way too big, so let me just cut that part off. Make sure you have enough to drape around the corner. And then just taping the center down, we're going to start shaping it around the neck. So make your little slits until you can drape it. In this case, I only had to make 2 slits. And then we're going to fold the shoulder part, fold it to match the shoulder line that you did. This is going to get a little tricky for me because of the angle that I'm standing. Just making sure that you have nice and that it drapes nicely across the back. And take your time gently without pulling the fabric. This is easy for me because I've done it multiple times on multiple dolls, and then just pin it across like this. And you can feel it if you're nicking your doll, so be careful at this point. So see, it's nice, and you have a shoulder seam like right there. Then across the back, we're gonna go with the armhole. So start making your slits just like you did for the front, up to where you want your armhole to lay. Just enough slits so that you can lay it across like this. Sometimes you need a dart in the back, sometimes you don't, so we'll see. Okay, so once you're satisfied, you know, making sure that you don't that your fabric doesn't distort. In this case, I do the dart in the back because she has like a sway back. So whatever needs shaping, we do it with darts. So just lay your fabric across like we did for the front. Do snips at the waist if you need to, so that the fabric lays nice and flat. And then I am going to cut a little bit more fabric here. Because we're going to do the same thing we did for the shoulder, is fold your fabric back. And lay it across where your seam line is, your seam line that you drew for the front. And then pin it the same way. Another thing I recommend, like if you don't have a body that you can use, that you're not worried about damaging it, because I know these dolls are very expensive, you can tape a little piece of cardboard around the seams where you're going to pin. That way, if your pin catches, it's not going to catch the doll's body. So that's the the back now. And again, wherever there's, wherever the fabric is bunching up, just make a little slit so it lays down. And here I just have a little tiny pleat that I have to make. I mean, if you're satisfied with the way it fits, you can just leave it, but I just like to make sure it fits perfectly. And I can feel right here that the fold of the fabric, I'm going to be catching it with the pins. So be careful when you take it apart, when you take it off the doll. And that's why it's important to mark with your pencil. So mark the pleat the same way you did. With the front pleat. Maybe you don't need the pleat. You can just, pull the fabric just a little bit this way, but just for the sake of the video, I'm going to go ahead and do the pleat. Because this is going to be a really small one. So now you can cut off that excess on the arms. And we're going to start marking it the same way we did the front. I use a pencil, and the way I mark, just for the sake of consistency, I'm going to mark the neck first. This pencil is better for me. It marks easier. So mark it, make sure you match the front where you did the front. And mark your back neckline. It's not as rounded. And then to mark the shoulder seams, what I do is I take a pencil and I kind of rub it on the side like that, so I know where my seams are going to be. Where my seams are going to lay. And then do the armhole, match it from the one on the front. And you can match those seams later, but it's easier just to match it on the sloper from the get-go. All the way around till you meet where you did the underarm seam on the other side. That looks good. Then we're going to mark our waist. And here is a chance to do any corrections. The waist kind of pulls up a little bit in the back here. Add any pins if you have to. And then mark your dart on both sides. I'm correcting the waistline a little bit there in the front because it's too low for my liking. Just remember which line it is that you want to cut. And give it a good check to see if you forgot anything. Okay. So we're all set. Now at this point, just take the sloper off the body. The nice thing about this, having a sloper, is that, you know, if you see a fashion that there's no patterns available for, you can always make your own. Because basically all clothing is just a bodice and that drapes around the body in whatever shape you want it to. Okay, so we'll put our model to the side. Oh, I forgot to mark the side seam. So let me do that while I'm at it. Okay, so we're pretty much done with this part of the, and then you can straighten out your markings before you take the pins out as well. And that's why I put the pins that way, so that I can trace them in the back and the front. It probably helps if you do it in a different color, if you have like a lot of markings. And make sure that you don't use a heat erasable pen, because if you're going to press your sloper before you cut it out, your markings are going to erase. Take all your pieces of tape off. That's another thing. Sometimes I leave the tape on and it gets all gooey in your iron. Okay, then we're going to remove all the pins. Once you're satisfied that all your markings are in place, you can always do adjustments later, because we're going to sew this and do a test before you start using it to make patterns out of. So take all your pins off and all your tape. And you're going to end up with the front and a back bodice. So there's your front bodice. And our back. And what you can do at this point is straighten out your lines. It's I don't have a French curve in front of me right now, and I don't know where it is, but I'll just straighten out my lines by hand. And at this point, you can either trace this whole thing to add seam allowances, or add the seam allowances right on the muslin. And I'm going to go ahead and add my seam allowances right on the muslin. This is going to be cut on the fold, so don't add a seam allowance to the front because we're closing it in the back. I'm just highlighting my line so I can see it better. And then add your seam allowances to the side. I use this little, it's a quilter's ruler thing. It has an exact 1/4 inch seam allowance. You can give it whatever seam allowance you want. And you want to do this so that the pieces match when you're sewing them. And go ahead and add all your seam allowances all around. I'm gonna go ahead and do that off camera. And for this big dart, I add the seam allowance in between it, because when you go sew it, if you cut it with the seam allowance, it'll be so much easier. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish that off camera, and then I'll be back with the next step. I finished tracing all my seam lines on the fabric sloper, and then I went and copied it onto a piece of paper so I can make the pattern out of it to test it. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut these pieces out on pattern. I'm gonna cut the front on the fold of the fabric, and the back I added 1/2 inch for a seam allowance. This will be the center line. And let me go ahead and cut those pieces, and I'll come back and show you how I put it together, and we'll test it on the doll. So I finished cutting my pieces out, and I'm going to cut them on fabric to test them. And then cutting is just like any other bodice. Put your front piece on the fold of the fabric. And we're gonna pin it and cut it out. And then I'm gonna sew it by sewing the shoulders together first, making my darts, and then closing it on the side. And along, because this is just for a test, along the armholes and the neckline, I'll do a stitch right along, a stay stitch right along the armhole so that I can clip it. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut that, and then I'll be back. I put my bodice together, and I'm gonna go ahead and press all the seams open. I'm gonna press this dart open. And I'm going to clip along the armholes and the neck hole just so they fit like they're supposed to fit. I haven't tried it on the doll yet, on the torso. And I made also a stay stitch along the center line and a 1/4 inch away from that, so that would be where I fold it and pin it together to the other side so that it's on the center line. So let me go ahead and do that offline, press it and finish clipping. No, I'm not sure if you can see where the stay stitch is. 1/4 inch away, like I had on my pattern. Okay, here's the final reveal. I pressed the seams down for the back closing. This is the center line, that seam. And we're gonna try it on and see if my bodice was successful, and it is. Fits like a glove. Look at how beautiful that is. And if it doesn't fit the way you want it, here's your chance to make adjustments. Okay, so the only adjustment that I need to make on the paper pattern is to true the lines over here on the waist. I kind of went too much on a curve, so I'll mark it down on this pattern first, on this test, and then I'll mark it on my pattern. Also, I might take it in a little bit on the sides, a little bit more. But otherwise, it looks fabulous. And I already had made this one before, and I have one that's perfect. But that's okay if there's a little bit of ease, because, you know, depending on what fabric you use to make your garments, you might need to make it a little bit, give it a little bit more ease or a little bit less. Over here, I actually probably will just take in the darts a little bit. Just maybe like an eighth of an inch on each side. That's the final thing. And I want to provide this for free, but I haven't figured out how to upload them to YouTube yet, so people can download the free template. But when I do, I'll figure it out and upload them. I plan to make another follow-up video to do the sleeves and the skirts and pants, because my goal is to have an entire set of slopers so I can make my own fashions. And you can do this for any doll. It doesn't have to be for just Smart Dolls. So any doll you have, the same principles apply. Thank you for watching.